Ďakujem pekne. Dobrý deň. Bohužiaľ, že moja prezentácia bude v angličtine. No, rozumiem slovenský 90%, 80% český češtine. No, nejaké otázky to aj profesionálne to lepšie pre mňa, že angličtina bude. No. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share some of the results of my research into the application, very practical applied Habermas of his notion of basic validity claims, and specifically the claim to normative rightness for analyzing the sort of public opinion, put it in the quotes of public discussion on the internet. Maybe just a few words about myself. I put it independent scholar. I'm in the Delib right now. I did my PhD at the Institute of Communication Studies, University of Leeds. Simon, my former colleague, and now I probably best would be affiliated with the e-governance academy in Tallinn, Estonia. So my background is electronic democracy, participation, citizen engagement. So I'm trying to combine my consultancy, freelance consultancy, and academic track. There are sort of four main parts of the presentation, which I divided into sections which deal with some my main theoretical assumptions. Then I'm looking at sort of analytical capabilities of what I have devised as a means of using Habermas theory more empirically. Then comes the sort of empirical research, some empirical data, what I have done. It's not finished research, but still I think there is something that I would like to share with you, and then some conclusions. What is really interesting, I mean, it's also an advantage to be to presenting so late on the second day. Usually disadvantage because everyone is tired, but I think it's good that you can skip some of the slides or at least scroll through them quickly. A lot has been covered during today and yesterday, so therefore probably I wouldn't go deep into describing and justifying the online public sphere, the virtual public sphere. Thanks to Simon, it's been already sort of presented that this kind of the public sphere exists. But what is really interesting for me is not that we can say that the public sphere has been reborn in the digital age, in the digital realm, but for me, first of all, as a keen reader of Habermas, not really a specialist to say, it was a striking similarity between those circumstances and key characteristics of the emergence of the public sphere in the 19th century as Habermas described it. Of course, in his seminal book, he later has been changing his opinion and sort of making it more flexible, but that's not really sort of subject to my research. But what is interesting that when we look at sort of computer-mediated communications, online deliberations, of course, we know the deliberative democracy, that's his main idea. So, and then everyone is asking the question, so whether democracy can be improved. And of course, there has been a lot of hype in that respect in terms of electronic democracy. But the point that most of the research, in my view, when they're trying to merge sort of this concept that it's often very technically oriented in a way that it comes from the media or it comes from the technology side when you study hyperlinks, when you study sort of technological properties, when you metaphorize the internet, you say the web has failed or anything. So we're really probably missing something that is really underlying those very complex communication processes. And my idea was that I would not just take an empirical material and trying to analyze and then to fit it into the existing frameworks, theoretical frameworks of, for example, the public sphere. But I would take something very specific, this toolbox, at least for me, those validity claims were the instrument through which I could analyze the empirical stuff, the empirical data, and then interpret that in the same theoretical framework, and then avoid those situations when you can sort of take in a ground approach and you have lots of data and then you're thinking which particular framework that data or your conclusion would fit. So this is something which I thought that would be worthwhile doing. And as I mentioned, that those similarities, they're quite striking in a way that before the public sphere, in that description Habermas has done, it has this emancipatory potential. It was, as it was mentioned, I think yesterday, the private public sphere with private persons, and of course, when we look at this plurality of the public sphere, plebeian and others counter. So the point is that, at least what I gather from Habermas, that those other public spheres, they acted, they were constituting the public sphere, because the elitist bourgeois public sphere could not exist with those. So in fact, it's a very interesting admission that when he refers to Russian philosopher Bakhtin and said that this is exactly when he read his analysis of Rabelais, he could understand how exactly that was working in terms of those alternative multiple public spheres. And I think that that's something is valid when we look at the virtual public sphere. Of course, there's a lot of criticism that it's very fragmented, there are lots of different communities, it doesn't make sense to analyze them because it's so dispersed, but I think that this is something which is actually quite good. Again, my interest was not in analyzing the elitists, it's not media discourses. I'm using discourse analysis in a way, but it's not media per se, it's something people, some reference made to specialist discourses, but I'm looking at those laymen, those ordinary people. Of course they could be experts, no doubt about that, and who knows, I could comment on some website, and I think I'm an expert in e-government, but on other issues I'm not the expert, but I'm still an ordinary person in that respect. I'm not a professional politician. So this is something where, again, the idea was that there is a lot of course, talk about how can policymakers tap to that knowledge which people possess collectively, and whether there is any epistemic value in that respect. I think that Habermas is giving, whatever his attitude does that, he's giving quite clear description that this is something where there are streams of communication. There is public opinion. In fact, he says that public opinion could be really sort of true public opinion when it is discussed, when it is discursive. Otherwise, public opinion does not exist. But of course, in modern politics, that's very important. You compare polls and advertising, and lots of negative stuff, and market researches too. So this is something where I thought that it would be look how people during their discourses take positions, whether they change positions, whether they're civil or not. This is something which falls under the category of online deliberation. Again, very disputed, hot area. Those validity claims, I found, after sort of experimenting quite a lot, found quite useful instrument to look at that, to document that, and then coming up with some idea of whether those discussions really can relate any opinion in that respect. Most of you know that these are those discursive instruments, and what is important, I think, in this respect. I'm talking about speech acts. It could be oral, written, text, doesn't matter. So I'm trying to sort of extend that Habermas notion to that. But generally, yes, that's a speech act, and that we're looking at not simply linguistically. It's not data mining, some kind of tagging, but we have to look at the underlying intended meaning of that speech act. So it's Foucauldian statement. So you look at statement, if you look at discursive formations, discourses, so it's statement, that's a unit, and of course it cannot be described linguistically, even it cannot be described logically in that respect. So this is, you have to capture that intended meaning, because whatever you write, you say, because there is some intention behind that. Again, some of that has been already mentioned, so I'm not going to, but it was important that when you claim something, you articulate your position, you expect its validation means that somebody should agree, disagree, or just ignore. So it's something which up to those participants, as I never knew that Habermas was actually referring to Mikhail Bakhtin, but Bakhtin said that his idea of polyphony, and he said that if your message is never lost, is never heard, there's always history to that. And of course, when you say something, you really embed that history of communication into what you say and what you would expect from. So it's past, present, future, just as one. So again, I just presenting this chart again. You know, these are communicative worlds of based on 3 types of validity claims, which refer to subjective personal truthfulness, that you're always honest and sincere in what you're saying. Then we go to overall propositional truth, that we refer to that world, some facts. But I think what is important for me, that second or third type of validity claims, which claim a certain rightness in normative, and this is where we can see whether around those claims, if we can distill them, we can define that there are those solidarities of people. So it's those who take this particular position, they call the intersubjective solidarities. And if we can depict them, if we can see how those solidarities change, because I may be for that particular policy in building this highway, but I could be against in building a nuclear plant, for example, somewhere. So this is something which is essential, fundamentally, I would say, theoretically, but also quite useful in terms of looking at various empirical stuff. Again, this is some of the description, which is this middle pillar where you claim something which you believe you share with someone. It's been research objective, as I said, that to test that, to see how it's working, whether we can, on the one hand, assess the deliberative quality of online, meaning that it's rational. I take a bit different view on the rationality. Of course, it's discourse irrational, but for me, those citizens participating in public and political discussion, they're usually rational because they participate, but the very fact of their participation, they demonstrate their rationality. They want to take part in the processes of policy making. Most likely they're really interested in raising the political efficacy of policies. But of course, there is also a rational side when you look at the argumentation, arguments. I've done that in my past research a bit, so it's been really some issues clear. But what I'm looking, again, referring to Habermas, that he says that either you take affirmative or negative attitude. So it's not necessarily consensus, of course. It's understanding. So you understand the person, you disagree, but you understand. That's the key. So the case study was discussion on the Russian internet, which devoted to an article published by the New York Times in 2008, and that was about the first term of Putin's presidency, and quite negative, saying that under Putin, democracy has shrunken. And what is interesting, that the paper translated that article into Russian and posted on the internet, on the live journal platform, so that Russians, or not just Russians, but Russian-speaking, I would say, readers would discuss it. At the same time, some of the comments were translated into English and posted on the New York Times website. So it was quite interesting interaction between different cultures, and I'm not going into that, but what I did, I used just a sample of about 200 posts. From my past experience, I know that's quite enough, even 70, 100, that's good. You can make sense of what's being discussed. But for specifically looking at the opinion of discussions of coding validity claims, normative rightness, that was smaller, 100, which was fine. That's how it looks. The thread looks like. It has a bit specific, but it's the logic of claim that has been that while you reading a discussion and you decide what you should do, you just read, you're a lurker, or you make sense, you have your opinion, so you're trying to select a topic that you're interested in whatever America thinks of Russia. I'm not Russian myself, but then you have to problematize that issue. So you have to specify, you have to formulate that in that respect. That will be interesting for further reaction. You're looking at a number of steps, and then you express your attitudes, you formulate, you word that position, and you may actually have that claim, but not necessarily that you have, but I found that 70% do actually have. And then you validate others. So this is a simplified schematic logic. The coding was done in very sort of technical manner. I'm not going into that a lot. It's a bit complex, dynamic Excel tables and Excel, but I sort of assign a number to each validity claim, which refers to certain values, a certain position. So they just go 1, 2, 3, 5, B, C, and then I have these green. It's identification IDs, identifiers, so I can always tell which message that was, which participant that was, and sort of serial number. So this is simply a technicality. And for example, one of the claims have said the article is untruthful, for example. So you clearly sort of say that the article is wrong, and basically you by definition, you against the policy, for example, of the New York Times, not necessarily America itself. So what should be important, what is important here, that when sort of you identify that claim, you formulate, of course you can word that in different ways as I did it, but what is important that the intended meaning is underpinned by that this article is wrong, the article is untruthful, the article is whatever, so the meaning is very clear. And then we go up to the higher topic, which I had said from the very beginning, that we talk about the whole relation between Russia and America. This is, you have this high-level topic, and then you have issues at a lower level where you have many of them, but when you generalize, you've got a bit less. Some of the statistics of that, for example, those posts were made by almost 60 participants, and overall 179 claims were made. 177 were validated. It means that somebody responded to that. I had to actually code each, as far as I could, each claim made. And of course, when I look at further posts, some of them were validated, some of them were validated more than once, basically. Some of the claims, some authors were not validated at all, so they were not interested for other discussions. So it's very sort of difficult to say. But overall, I found that there was 112 unique, so not repetitive validations. So it means that we can sort of have all those 112 issues. And what is important, again, that pretty much in line with other researchers in my own experience, that discussions on the internet, they're usually driven by disagreements. It is quite in stark with those offline meetings. We have lots of literature on that, saying that people usually prefer to talk about politics with their fellows, like-minded people, because in real life, because you may feel awkward, discussing different positions. So this anonymous environment perhaps is more sort of conducive to debate. So I found that in this particular discussion, 2/3. In some discussions where you have a real clear goal, for example, it's about mobilization, that you want to have a campaign or something, that could be 50%, but I found never less than 50%. Half, it's still disagreements, even between sort of collaborators. This is an example of how you sort of validate that you have a claim, then there is either agreement, disagreement, then you have another sort of justification, correction, and that goes on and on and on and on. So this is interaction. Again, for me, it's not interaction as it's usually taken in media studies, but it's interaction kind of either in technical terms or that Raphael, for example, he says that as long as there is a piece of that content is being spread across a thread, then it's still interaction with all these messages and their authors. There is always this dialectical relation between agreement and disagreement. I just simply, for convenience, say for and against. If you claim that you disagree with the article, and then another participant, number 5, disagrees with this particular participant, but then another participant can again be against of the article by agreeing with that. So if the fact that you agree or disagree is not really important to say. This is what is important, that the issue of that. So therefore the coding process was really looking at those uniques of whether you form those solidarities, that if you, whether through agreement, disagreement, you still think that the paper was not right in the assessment of democracy in Russia, then you're part of that. So this is finally a few slides which represent the findings that so what people say, giving voice to this or face, not really face, but at least names, because I know these nicknames of those people who disagree. So positions for quite. I mean, probably if you would do a poll, you would also agree with that given special relations between Russia and the United States, that sort of putting policy was maybe patriotically supported. You see that 26% for that, and at the same time, interesting that even American democracy was supported. So quite a lot of people were criticizing, for example, just 6% were in favor of this particular publication, this paper, but they gave credit to the American democracy as such. So it's quite interesting. Then these are all themes, 6 themes which were identified. Many issues below, but these were themes which came up. Russian military policy was discussed, American democracy, the New York Times paper, Russian human rights defenders, their role as a sort of American allies which should be criticized, then Russian government policies, economic policies, and business policies. So I go through all that through themes. And now looking at those who express disagreements, so they're forming those solidarities against that. And again, we see that for example, Putin's policies were less criticized, so there's 7%. Of course, it mirrors what you say for, then basically by exclusion you're saying that. But still, there are some interesting, well, America was sort of criticized again quite a lot, but still they were quite poor. Then those are positions per se, but these are the number of participants, basically, the share of that. So and again, basically it doesn't change fundamentally that. So you see that still those 70%, 37% of all who supported something in favor, most of that was Putin's policies. And similarly, again, if we look against, so it's just 11% from that group who against. So these are just in confirmation of that for me that's working. I mean, it does not necessarily need to be like that always, but what I'm thinking that we just we can disaggregate a lot, but we can aggregate a lot. I think it's important that we can see all that nuances which the public opinion per se exists, because it's more than that in this. And if you scan those discussions, if we believe that that makes impact on whatever is being decided by the government authorities, then of course we have very, very careful, not just mining words, for example, or keywords, or looking how often repeated that particular word, because it doesn't say much, but what's important was the meaning of that. So this is the, well, conclusions. I think it's working. Some of the assumptions were confirmed, but of course there are many questions to be asked. What I think that this conversational type of democracy, whatever it's public sphere, Habermas, that has a value, has to be taken seriously. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, I understand what you mentioned at the beginning. One, it's not possible today with this Habermasian idea of the Bildungsbürgertum or educated bourgeoisie, whatever you call it, that more groups should be included. But when you presented these public debates, there were only statements. I agree, I don't agree. What does it mean? Whereas Habermasian universal discourse, practical discourse, moral discourse, it seemed to be a little bit like simple acclamations. What you presented, that I agree with Putin's politic or something. I didn't see whether the actors had some rational debate, whether they had some deliberation or something.
Oh, they definitely have.
So, and the second question, this Habermasian idea was that this civil society or public sphere opposes state structures. And I also didn't see, if you make this parallel, that it's some kind of new public sphere, how they communicate with state or with...
Well, as I said, that the objective of the research was to look at the ordinary people discourses. This is, I refer to what Habermas described as the emergence of the public sphere, when it was not just the bourgeois public sphere, but there was many different public spheres, and only because of those, these could exist actually against this background. So it, again, if we look at what's happening in the current, it could be different maybe in Russia, in more established democracies, but as such, the public sphere in Russia is definitely monopolized by state-controlled media. So what we have now, the public sphere, apart from street protests when people go and protest here, that's also public square. But these debate and discussion and the media discussions, they're definitely controlled by the state. So that was not my object of research. So what I'm looking at that, and this is why Habermas concept is important, that initially Habermas was claiming that in order to have rational discourses, that they would meet those ideal speech situation conditions. We know that, and he initially was claiming that everyone should be included. But after that, he changed that. He said that we have to see that those who won't participate are not excluded deliberately, that there is no coercion on the participation side. So on those discussion, these are not state platforms.
Why did he write this idea?
Well, I have to look at my PhD thesis. It's written there.
I thought he kept this idea.
No. Because he was criticized because, okay, that's idealistic. It cannot exist. It doesn't exist in this form. So therefore, he eased those conditions. So it means that, of course, you can't have a discussion that everyone participates. That's simply not possible. But of course, much more sense makes if those participate who can and will participate. For example, in those discussions, because I was studying that I didn't see any coercion, and for Habermas, coercion was very important, that there should be free participants. Nobody should curse somebody to say something. So this is just to answer that.
So the last question, Joe, I don't want to call it rationality or this kind of classical Habermasian idea, but still when you presented some statements, when you made the research, did you see that the people who participated in the blog, they supported their statements by some argumentation.
Yeah, this is my scientific analysis. Of course, that was the purpose of the research, to look at whether there is systemic value, that whether they can look what exactly is being sort of, what are the groups in for or against that. But of course there was a full-fledged discussion on that. For example, when I did my PhD, of course I was discussing quite a lot of 3,000 posts, and I had a special sort of category standard of the use of argumentation, whether they supported by facts. Yes, it's there. I'm not reporting about that. I'm reporting also what is the outcome of that discussion. So if you look at that, any discussion, I think if you look at the Czech, whatever, Slovak, Polish, then you see that some people produce arguments, some of them don't produce arguments, some just stay. So yes, there is, and then you can assess to which extent that discussion has been rational in that respect, meaning that they use argumentative, that they use argumentation for that. So there's lots of literature on that. But again, that was my object analysis. So again, I'm thinking that if they participate in discussion, they're rational as the citizenry. They sort of civic duty to be active citizen. So this is a bit different take on that. But,
Right, let us give a voice to Joe.
Just a small comment, but on the question of coercion, how do you understand the incivility? You said 10% of those posts were uncivil, and I wonder how many people chose not to participate because of those uncivil posts, and how many people in general don't participate in online discussions because they don't want to be called all these names.
Well,
also kind of
that's a very interesting question. I was expecting that. I studied thousands of posts, and basically there is a huge body of literature of swearing and being rude and civil to typical Asia. I don't find it. Again, I look at that and sort of align with those researchers who see value in this conversational democracy. Yes, it's not like you would discuss the issue in the British Parliament or European Parliament, and that's it. But you know, even in Parliament there could be quite nasty discussions. So what I talk that people, usually those uncivil messages, as I call them, it's easy to code them, of course. They're usually personalized. So if you don't have arguments, you can always go personal and say something. Or there could be some issues about sort of Americans, immigrants, or ethnicity, you know that. So, but the point is that there are not that many. I don't know how many would not participate. I don't think much, because if you don't, you still can contribute. And I noticed that even to rude messages, usually if you want to continue participation, your answer is quite polite. So if you will continue swearing or being really rude, then you would just get any responses, and people want to discuss issue, they would just ignore the best, or it would be just bad. So this is not the point to be rude if you want to discuss. The whole idea of discussion, you can be. What I'm saying that these are not very, very polite. I noticed that being very polite is used as an argument. So you want to draw an attention to someone. So if you say, oh, Mr. Ojami, so it means that other arguments didn't reach him, so he's trying to be so polite. But normally just talk. We just talk as everyday talk, as we're talking somewhere, and we don't like to be rude. I mean, even if we're drinking beer, right, so much, because people just believe that. So this is, but then it's a good blogging platform, right? It's something that, you know, there's some reputation. There are lurkers. Yeah, there are people who really don't participate, but from my previous research, I know that they're still waiting for the moment where they believe that their input could be of added value, so that they say something which has not been said, they claim some issue. So therefore, in that respect, I didn't see anything that would prevent it, other people, in terms of coercion, that they can say, stop that, for example. But they still participate, and just goes back on the right track. So it's tolerated. It's not zero tolerance, of course not, but it's quite tolerable. And I think, again, people discuss the issue, socialize, make their positions, and we have to deal somehow with that.
Okay, thank you very much. Our time is over, so we can thank you very much.